Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my full review and discussion for the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. The first part of this video will be spoiler-free in case you are one of the people who, like me, had not read this series yet. It took me a long time. And then the rest will be like an in-depth kind of spoilery discussion. So this is such a popular and well-known series that I'm not going to waste too much time on summarizing it. There's Alina, the main character, and the Darkling is the villain. And there's all this stuff about Grisha powers where people have these certain magical abilities, and it's set in kind of a fantasy Russia setting, and that's really all you need to know. You've probably heard the basic setup for the first book because, again, it is so popular. So the first book is called Shadow and Bone, and I gave this 2 stars. The second book is Siege and Storm, which I gave 2.5 stars. And the third and final book is Ruin and Rising, which I also gave 2.5 stars. So as you can tell, I did not love this trilogy like I was hoping to. I feel like the writing and the world building were 2 things that I was really expecting to enjoy because I heard such good things about like the magic system and the setting and Leigh Bardugo's like skill as an author. And unfortunately, I just felt like those aspects were okay. There were some passages that I really did enjoy, but I think a big part of the reason I didn't love the writing is Alina, the first person narrator and the main character. So like, no matter how good a writing style is, if it's coming from the place of a character who you cannot stand, it might kind of affect your feeling on the writing overall, which I think is what happened to me. And again, the world building, it just didn't feel very like detailed to me. It felt like a very vague fantasy Russia. Like there were all these words that were thrown in that was supposed to help with the world building, and I don't feel like that always worked. And another big problem I had was the cast of characters. I mentioned Alina and how much I didn't like her, which I will kind of get into more in the spoiler section. I just felt like she was very two-dimensional. I didn't really understand why she made any of her decisions. I couldn't really get a handle on like what kind of person she was. I didn't really feel like she had much of a personality outside of her attachment to Mal, but there were a couple of characters that I really enjoyed. I think Leigh Bardugo has a real talent for crafting interesting and well-developed side characters. Like Nikolai, who is pretty much the fan favorite, I think, from the series. I did love him. He was so funny and clever, and I really love the depth that he had, where like the political like machinations he always has to worry about because he's the prince and everything. And I did really like him, and all of the scenes with him were some of my favorites because he was such a dynamic character. And I also thought the Darkling made for a very interesting villain. Going back to the writing situation, for the scenes with the Darkling and Nikolai and a couple of the other side characters, I feel like that's when I really noticed Leigh Bardugo's writing style as being really good, because I think partly because I was so invested in the characters, but I also just think that she wrote better when she was writing about certain characters. So that was something that was really interesting to me. As far as the plot goes, I was pretty disappointed. It felt very repetitive to me, like it felt kind of basic, I guess. And part of this might be because I had been hearing about the series for so long that I almost felt like I already knew the story, you know? Even without spoilers, it's like once you've heard so many people talk about it, it's like you kind of know what to expect. So maybe that was part of the reason, but it just felt like nothing really happened. I just don't like the way a lot of things turned out. I felt that a lot of the big plot elements were pretty predictable, and it just left me wanting more. There were a couple of pet peeves in these books that I think did affect my overall enjoyment. I don't necessarily think they completely dragged my rating down or anything, but for example, Mal, the like main love interest character, he's basically the embodiment of a trope that I really hate, and that is like the guy not realizing he's in love with a girl until someone else starts paying attention to her. And then suddenly it's like they've been in love forever and he's always known he's loved her, even though he's been like with a bazillion other girls that he never shuts up about. So that's something that I personally just really find irritating and frustrating and unlikable. So if you don't have that issue, you probably would enjoy Mal's character more, and being as he's one of the main characters, you probably would enjoy the book more if you like him. And I also think the hype was so insane for this series. I do think that because the hype was so crazy, it almost like didn't affect me, because I went into this series where it's like, I could love this or I could hate this because of how much everyone else is like talking about it. And I was also spoiled for some things, for actually quite a few big things that happen, especially in the third book. So that's also something to take into consideration, but all that being said, I do think that some of the problems I mentioned and that I'm going to get into, like, I would have had issues with these anyway. I think it certainly didn't help that this book series was so hyped and that I had been spoiled for things, but like, I don't think it would have been a favorite if these things hadn't happened, you know? And now I'm going to get into the spoiler stuff, so if you guys have not read this series and you don't want to be spoiled, then come back to this video when you've read the books. And for the rest of you, let's get into some specifics of things I didn't like or some things I did like. So first off, I mentioned in my last wrap-up that I was really disappointed in the way that the female side characters were handled. I mentioned Zoya and Genya particularly, and I'm so happy because that got a lot better in the third book. I really loved Zoya. You're not really supposed to, and I think part of it is because she didn't like Alina, and neither did I, so every time Zoya would say something bitchy about her, I thought it was funny, rather than being on Alina's side and being kind of offended. So that's not really what's supposed to happen. I also thought Zoya was just such an interesting person. Like, she kind of has this facade of being, like, very brusque and very, like, selfish, but I think that where it counts, she is a good person, and I really liked seeing that side of her more. And I mentioned Nikolai and how much I loved him, and just how funny he was. I was actually surprised at how many funny lines or scenes there were, most of them from Nikolai, so that was kind of a nice thing, because I didn't think this was a series that was going to have a lot of, like, humor, you know, breaks or anything. And now for some of the less positive character stuff. I hate Mal so much. I do not support him being a character in the series, and I definitely think he was the wrong choice for the love interest, because I just didn't give a shit, basically. Like, it was a little better in Ruin and Rising, but like in the second book, I got so tired of Mal acting like his relationship drama was more important than saving the whole world. It just pissed me off. It was like everything was about him, and he was just such a whiner. And like I said, it did get better in this last book, but I just hated him. I just couldn't get behind him as a character, and definitely not as the love interest. And also Mal is just, he's so extra. Like, I mean, a lot of the characters are kind of overdramatic, but Mal has like no reason to be. He has no personality, so I don't know why he's acting like he's even interesting enough to be overdramatic. I'm sorry if Mal is like your favorite character, because I'm being so mean about him, but like the part where like Alina sees his tattoo and it's like, I am become a blade. What? Who are you fooling? And I mean, that kind of makes sense later with the reveal that, like, he is the third amplifier, which I will come back to. Like, that does kind of make sense, but I just couldn't get over the fact that he was acting like that when he really had nothing to offer the story. Like, he had nothing to offer Alina, and he had nothing to offer the reader. So it's like, stop acting like you're so important. You're not. And, like, the whole ending with Mal and Alina, like, living in harmony and love for the rest of their days, I wasn't thrilled because, again, I did not like Mal. That was one of the things I had been spoiled for, so I knew Alina ended up with him and that it was very, like, ordinary kind of ending. But there's the line that's like, they had an ordinary life if, what was it, if, like, love and, like, peace could ever be considered ordinary or something. And we were clearly supposed to think, like, oh, Alina got what she wanted. But no, like, it can't be considered ordinary. I think that ending was too ordinary for Alina. And partly because I just hate the trope where the main character gets all their power taken away. I hate that. I feel like you're pushing the reset button on the entire series, and it kind of makes, like, all of the events that happened, like, pointless to an extent. I don't know if you guys agree with that. Maybe, like, tell me in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. So that was just something I already didn't like. But also the fact that, like, Mal got everything he wanted, because he always had such a problem with Alina being more powerful than him, with Alina having powers at all. And just, like, I kind of understand why Alina would want to step back from being, like, so adored and so, like, people obsessing over her. I do kind of get that. But it pisses me off that, like, the end of the book is, oh, Mal was right. Like, men shouldn't feel threatened by their girlfriend's, like, abilities. Like, that's unacceptable if a girl has, like, more power or, like, is better at something than you, and that just didn't sit right with me. I will say, though, I did enjoy, like, the aspect of the ending where it's, like, they go back to the orphanage, like, they start taking care of people. Like, they basically turn this really bad period of their lives into something that will be better for, like, other people. Like, I like the message of that, like, they're not passing on their bad childhood. So another issue I had with the characters was, like, the fact that all of the character deaths were handled so badly, in my opinion. Like, the Darkling died so easily. I thought Baghra, am I even saying her name right? I'm probably not, I'm sorry. Baghra, like, his mother's death, I thought that was just like so dumb and anticlimactic. Like I don't think that was part of her character. Like or it didn't seem like it to me. Obviously Leigh Bardugo wrote her, so it is part of her character. But it just seemed very like odd to me. It felt out of the blue. It felt like it was just supposed to shock and upset us. And like I don't see why it happened. Like it didn't really accomplish anything. And it also like not that like death has to accomplish things, but it also didn't tell us any more about Baghra. I guess we kind of got like why she was so upset by her past and like the Darkling was affected by her death. So it did a little, but I didn't like that. I thought it was handled really badly. The Darkling's death was just like kind of ridiculous. Although I did like when he told Alina like not to have a grave for him because he didn't want it to, like he knew people were gonna like desecrate it and everything. It was really sad, but it was realistic, and I actually thought that was a part that was very well done. But just like the sheer number of deaths, I think was a problem in the book, because by the end of it, I just like, it was almost like you didn't care, because people are getting slaughtered left and right. Like Harshaw, who was like a kind of reasonably big supporting character at that point, he died off page in like half a line. And actually, I was looking at Goodreads reviews for people who were also disappointed, and a user named Kiki, I will link her review down below, described it as treating death with an almost sociopathic apathy. And like, that's exactly what it was. It was just, none of the deaths mattered. It was like people moved on so quickly that it didn't feel real to the reader. Like, none of it mattered. None of it mattered. Although, of course, Mal came back, because God forbid anything bad happened to him. Also, speaking of the whole, like, Baghra being Darkling's mother thing, that whole family reveal was so damn obvious, I thought. Like, I saw that coming from the beginning. And the being related to Morozova, also saw that coming. That was something I wasn't spoiled for. I can definitely enjoy books where I see some plot points coming, but I think I was already so upset by how other things were handled that at that point it was just like, of course. I will say that Mal being the third amplifier, that was a surprise for me. Like, that was a pleasant surprise almost, because I did not see that coming, and I thought it did a nice job of breaking up the, like, very basic, like, fetch quest aspect of the first two books, where it's like, we find the amplifier, and then the next book, we figure out the second amplifier, go get that. Like, I thought that was actually surprising to me, and it did kind of make sense of some weird plot stuff that had happened earlier. Going back to Alina and Mal and how much I hate them together, their whole sex scene in the greenhouse or the conservatory, fucking ridiculous. Like, I'm sorry. And part of it was, again, because I just did not like them as a couple. I did not like Mal. But it was clearly supposed to be, like, really, like, romantic, and it was supposed to affect us as, like, oh, the night before the battle, and they finally, like, fully express their feelings, and I was like waiting for it to be over. I just wanted to move on to like the actual end of the book because I wanted to be done. I also hated the fact that Alina never really felt like she grew into her power herself. Like her powers didn't seem that impressive until somebody else told her how to do something. And it was always like somebody else having to like tell her how to look at herself or tell her how to use her power, and I just didn't like that. Like, it felt like she didn't make many decisions for herself. Actually, it took a lot of convincing for me to actually see her powers as being effective in any way, because for the longest time I'm like, okay, so she can create sunlight, but if you're covering your eyes, she can't actually do that much to you. And then it turns out she can do this cut thing, which was like very vaguely defined. I did really like the invisibility thing because, as Leigh Bardugo says in the author's note, like, that is kind of a scientific thing. So I liked that she could like reflect light in a way that was really interesting and effective. But overall, I didn't like the power system, except for like some aspects here and there, like Genya I thought was really cool. There was another scene that I really liked, and that was, I think, at the beginning of the third book, where she escapes from the apparat, like from underground. That was so badass, and I really, really liked that, how they had planned that, how Alina actually like made a move to do something. I thought that was so good. I wish we had gotten more of those scenes throughout the series, but that was really cool. And another thing about the writing is like those pretentious like third person scenes where it's like the boy and the girl, and like they knew that their life was never ordinary, and the girl would stand at the window looking out at Rafka, at the beautiful city, and blah blah blah. And I actually, when I started the series like ages ago, I really, really liked the writing in those sections, like at the beginning. And I think just compared to like the very straightforward like boringness of Alina's perspective, I think I kind of fell out of love with them, because in contrast it just didn't work. So, as you can, I'm sure, tell, I was very disappointed in the third book. I was pretty disappointed in the series overall. And again, like, part of that I think is a little based on my expectations and like being spoiled, but I think a lot of it is just stuff that did not work for me and probably will work for somebody else. Like I know it will work for someone else because a lot of people really love this series, which is great. It wasn't for me, and I'm really sorry if you like adore this book or this series because I pretty much trashed it for most of this video. I didn't anticipate getting that angry about everything, but please comment down below and let me know your thoughts on the Grisha trilogy if you have read it. I know I was very late to it, so I think a lot of people have read it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!